I didn't raise my voice the night they tried to shame me in front of the board. The president had just finished her little speech about unauthorized resource usage and how my well was a community violation. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I just slid a copy of the original 1911 water rights certificate across the table with my great-grandfather's name embossed on the county seal. Their lawyer picked it up, squinted at it, and his face drained of color. Before he muttered, "This predates the HOA by over 70 years, I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever, and said nothing. The silence in that room told me I had already won. I hadn't moved out here looking for a fight. Quite the opposite. My wife and I had been searching for something quieter, somewhere to slow down after years of living in the city. We wanted a place where our kids could actually play outside without traffic or noise, where I could breathe without exhaust fumes in my lungs. When I found the old property my great-grandfather had left behind, an aging farmhouse on 20 acres, a private well, and a stretch of land that hadn't been touched by developers in decades, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never really known. I spent evenings fixing the porch, mornings walking down by the tree line, and weekends teaching my kids how to fish in the creek that still trickled through the back of the land. It was peaceful in the kind of way that makes you forget you ever lived any other life. I wasn't looking for drama. I didn't care about local politics. All I wanted was to keep the place standing, pay my property taxes, and maybe one day pass it on to my own kids the way it had been passed down to me. The first letter from the HOA felt like a mistake. A crisp piece of paper taped to my front gate, stamped with their logo, telling me I was in violation for unpermitted groundwater access. I had to read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding it. They were fining me for using my own well, the same well that had been drilled and recorded when Woodrow Wilson was still president. At first, I honestly laughed. It felt absurd. Like a prank. Who finds a man for pumping water on his own deeded land? But then the fines started coming in weekly, each one more aggressive than the last, threatening legal action if I didn't shut the well down and connect to the approved municipal water system. I tried to be reasonable. I sent polite emails, asking them to clarify under what authority they thought they could regulate a private well. I attached copies of county ordinances showing that private wells were outside HOA jurisdiction. I even went to one of their community meetings and tried to explain, calmly, that this wasn't just any well, it was a registered water right that had been part of the property long before the HOA even existed. The president smirked at me like I was some ignorant farmer, waved me off, and said, "Sir, all homeowners are subject to the same rules. You'll need to comply." That was the moment the tone shifted for me. Not outwardly, I didn't yell or storm out, but inside something clicked. I realized I wasn't dealing with ignorance. I was dealing with arrogance. They weren't going to listen, and they weren't going to stop. Every letter I sent was ignored. Every question was answered with another threat. They doubled my fines, then tripled them, and finally they announced they were pursuing legal action to cap my well. That's when I stopped trying to negotiate and started preparing to bury them in their own ignorance. I spent nights in my grandfather's study, pulling out dusty boxes of records I'd inherited but never really studied. Old deeds, tax receipts, water rights certificates with brittle paper and faded ink. I went to the county courthouse and requested microfilm copies of the original filings. Sure enough, the documents were airtight. In 1911, my great-grandfather had filed for water rights under the state's first in time, first in right system. Those rights weren't just casual permissions, they were legally binding property interests, recognized under state law as untouchable by future contracts or associations. They predated the HOA by 74 years, and it wasn't just the water rights. I dug deeper. The subdivision itself had been carved out of what used to be my family's larger ranch. The HOA existed because my grandfather had sold off portions of the land in the late 70s. But here's what they didn't know. When he sold, he specifically excluded the homestead tract where the well was located. The covenants they loved to wave around had never applied to this parcel in the first place. The HOA had literally no authority over me. The more I researched, the stronger I felt. I started documenting every letter they sent, every voicemail, every threat. I photographed the notices they taped to my door. I requested certified copies of every deed in the chain of title. I even contacted a water rights attorney who laughed when I told him what the HOA was attempting. "They don't have a leg to stand on," he said. "But if they want to push this to court, I'd be glad to watch them set fire to their own bank account." At home, things were tense. My wife worried about the constant harassment. My kids overheard the board president yelling at me once when I was mowing near the fence line, and they started asking if we'd have to move. I reassured them, but privately I carried that weight. That's when I knew this wasn't just about water anymore. This was about dignity. About not letting petty tyrants scare my family out of land that had been ours for over a century. So, when they finally called me to a formal hearing, I was ready. I walked into that stuffy little HOA boardroom, with a binder so thick it could have doubled as a doorstop. They expected me to beg? Instead, I sat quietly while they rattled off their complaints, each board member taking turns accusing me of endangering the community resource plan. I didn't respond. Not once. I let them talk themselves into a frenzy, puffing up their own importance. Then, when it was my turn, I calmly opened the binder, slid the original water rights certificate across the table, and leaned back. Their lawyer picked it up, squinted at the date, and went pale. The room fell silent. Finally, he said, "This document predates the HOA. It's binding." The president stammered something about jurisdiction and community standards, but it was over. Everyone in that room knew it. I didn't have to yell, didn't have to gloat. The law had been sitting in my family's drawer for over 100 years, waiting for this moment. The aftermath was almost anticlimactic. The HOA backed down immediately, quietly withdrawing all fines and dropping the case. They never admitted wrongdoing, of course, but their sudden silence was the loudest apology I could have asked for. Within months, 2 board members resigned, citing personal reasons. The president, who had been the loudest voice against me, stopped making eye contact altogether. She still drives by sometimes, slowing down near my gate, but she never rolls down her window anymore. Life went back to the way it was before: quiet mornings, long walks, evenings on the porch with my family. The difference is that now, when I turn on that well pump and hear the water flowing up from the earth, it feels like more than just water. It feels like a reminder that some things run deeper than bureaucracy, deeper than pettiness, deeper than any HOA covenant. My great-grandfather fought to secure that right for his family, and when the time came, it protected me exactly the way it was meant to. Now the neighborhood has gone silent. Some wave politely when I pass. Others turn away, pretending not to see me. Either way, I don't mind. The well still flows, the land is still mine, and the board has learned what happens when they try to rewrite history.